These are the worst industrial disasters ever caught on camera. And as the video progresses, the disasters only become more tragic.
Oh no!
It's April 6th, 2015, Monday evening. An explosion causes a huge fire in a chemical factory in southeastern China. What we're seeing is the footage from a citizen, moments after an oil leak in a pumping station caught fire, causing a blast in the entire facility. This is a disaster with consequences far beyond what anyone has realized yet. At approximately 7 p.m., a fire breaks out in a unit producing toxic paraxylene, or PX. This is a highly inflammable chemical used to make plastic bottles and polyester. The explosion is so huge that residents 31 miles away report feeling the tremor. 6 people are injured. One of them was wounded at the site, while the others sustained injuries from cuts that were caused by broken window panels due to the heavy shockwaves. All of them are immediately rushed to the hospital, and right after the incident, authorities order citizens to evacuate the area near the facility. By 12 p.m. on Tuesday, 19 hours after the explosion, over 780 firefighters and 131 fire engines put out the fire from 2 of the oil tanks that hold about 5.3 million gallons of oil each. And they think that they're close to extinguishing the flames, but they're wrong. For some reason, the fire just keeps reigniting. And it reaches a point where the mayor of Zhangzhou, the city we're talking about, announces in a press conference that a total of 929 firefighters are working on containing the fire. On Wednesday, another oil tank flames up, after 3 other storage tanks had been put out the night before. The authorities at this point have evacuated over 14,000 residents in nearby towns. This city looks like hell. For more than 2 days, firefighters work day and night to put out this disaster, and each of them faces the risk of another tank exploding right next to them. But they eventually manage to bring the situation under control. This is already the second time that they experienced this kind of disaster. Just 20 months earlier, in July 2013, reports from a Chinese magazine said an explosion happened from the exact same chemical plant.
The incident occurred amid growing public anger over plans by the Huarun cement factory to build a waste incinerator.
Although this disaster didn't cause any fatalities, this next New York cosmetic plant wasn't as lucky. On November 20th, 2017, at approximately 10:19 a.m. in the morning, a police lieutenant hears an explosion while driving by in New Windsor, New York. The explosion is revealed to be from Whirler International, a cosmetics company known for producing perfumes and beauty products. The reason for the disaster we're about to see is due to a single employee. In the CCTV footage, you can see him wiping off residue that seems to be on the white container, and just a second later, a huge explosion happens while the worker runs to safety. The only thing that is left is the fire that is able to spread throughout the factory, while the chemicals continue to leak out from the container. The cause for the explosion is the combination of static electricity while wiping off the container and the highly flammable chemical inside of it. The explosion is so huge that the other employees only report hearing a big bang. And by the time the workers came downstairs, the only thing they can see is flames. Now, almost all of the employees managed to escape unharmed.
All we heard was a big bang. We all thought something had hit the beams holding up our lab. So all we heard was run.
Including William Huntington, a 57-year-old longtime employee of the company. But not everybody is as lucky. The explosion injures 2 people inside the facility. Firefighters quickly rush over to actually contain the situation, unbeknownst to them that the disaster will only get worse. At 10:40 a.m., just 25 minutes after the first explosion, William, who just made it out safely, risks his life and decides to go back into the factory to make sure that everybody truly got out safely. And this is when the second explosion happens.
Fire officials say the men had to go in to fight the blaze, but they did not expect a second explosion.
The video shows sirens blaring and firefighters who are trying to contain the flame from outside of the factory. And even from a distance, the thick black smoke is visible. Now they do eventually manage to put out the fire, but William doesn't make it out alive. Authorities report his body was recovered by rescuers at 8 p.m. that night. The guy is like a hero. He entered again to make sure no more ladies were in the building, is what a co-worker said during an interview. Alongside his death, the incident further injures 8 firefighters, and more than 30 workers at this point have also been taken to the hospital.
I couldn't breathe. My chest was hurting and I felt really bad chest pain.
Reports show that earlier that year, the company has already been cited for 11 violations over unsafe conduct, and they've even been called a repeat offender following this tragic disaster. But even this wouldn't compare to the devastation of this next case.
Officials discovered cracks in the building yesterday, but workers say they had no choice but to go in.
The story you're about to hear is known as the deadliest garment factory disaster in history. April 23rd, 2013, a TV channel stationed in Dhaka, Bangladesh reports visible cracks along the Rana Plaza, and the employees in this building have concerns about going to work for the next day. The lower floor managers advise their workers to stay at home until the next safety notice. However, the industry workers in the upper floors receive an entirely different notice. They're told that the building is completely safe by the building owner. The Rana Plaza is an 8-story building standing just right above a dried up pond, which would normally instantly tell us that its foundation is pretty weak. It was initially a 4-story building, but the owner Sohail Rana used his connections in politics and actually built up the other 4 floors without a permit. It was a disaster bound to happen. The lower floors are occupied for commercial use, while the upper floors are shared by the garment factories of around 5,000 employees who work on producing clothes for major international brands like Zara, Mango, and even Walmart. The next day, April 24th, 2013, factory workers on the upper floors go to work as usual, despite having worries about their own safety. The managers threaten them and tell them that they won't receive any sort of money or salaries for months if they fail to go to work, and so they have no other choice. At 8:45 a.m., the power then goes out in the building, and the workers immediately start up the generators. But the reaction from the building is instant. With the machine on, workers actually notice the building swaying and shuddering. They can even hear loud bangs caused by the generator. At 9 a.m., the swaying becomes so strong that the workers begin to panic, and all of them immediately rush towards the exit. But even before they can manage to escape, a huge portion of the building collapses. The rear of the 8-story building falls on top of the other, instantly trapping thousands of workers inside. The damage of the collapse is so severe that not just locals know about it, but the news spread overseas. It's such a huge deal that the United Nations International Search and Rescue Group try to step in, but the Bangladesh government rejects their help. The local authorities claim that their emergency services are skilled enough. They can do it by themselves, which turned out to be far from the truth.
Not having heavy equipment to remove the heavy beams and floors, the workers effectively use their hands to get into areas where they suspect survivors to be there.
Witnesses report that the authorities and emergency services arrived hours after the incident, with some even stating that the rescuers didn't wear any protective equipment themselves. And for 19 agonizing days, the Bangladesh team works on rescuing the remaining workers, while still not accepting any outside assistance.
যে হঠাৎ করে একটা চিল্লানি আসলো যে স্যার স্যার এখানে জীবিত লোক আছে হয়তো এখানে জীবিত লোক আছে
By the time the mission ends, the authorities only managed to save 2,437 people from the rubble. Something that was supposed to be a relatively easy and avoidable incident turned into a tragically failed disaster that left a total of 1,134 people dead and over 2,500 seriously injured.
মাথার সমস্যা হয়েছিল, কিডনির প্রবলেম হয়েছিল, হাতে এখনো খোলা আছে।
But the authorities did one good thing. They decided to arrest the owner of the Rana Plaza, and it is reported that he even attempted to flee the country, but he was arrested after a 4-day manhunt. This next disaster, though, left damages you would never expect. It's May 4th. 1988, 11:30 a.m. An engineering crew doing routine maintenance on a television tower suddenly spots a fire from about a mile away, and they immediately start filming.
Looking at it, the brilliance of the fire was something like I'd never seen before.
On the entirely other side, workers inside the factory are currently repairing a building used to dry chemicals. Because the structure is made out of steel and fiberglass, they're using the typical welding equipment for the repair. During the welding process though, the sparks suddenly land on the fiberglass and it ignites a fire.
You know the batch house, is that what caught fire?
That's where it started, I think, yeah.
Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal with today's safety standards, but this factory in particular doesn't have any sort of fire suppression systems such as sprinklers or fire barriers. So very quickly, a fire starts spreading in a factory filled with chemicals.
Oh my God. See, I didn't see no cars leave at all.
No.
One sitting over there.
No, there was lots of cars, but you haven't seen anything leaving the area.
The employees know what would happen the very second both of these things came into contact, so all of them start evacuating immediately. One of the employees though, Roy Westerfield, survived polio and isn't able to move as quickly because of that, and he knows he simply won't make it out in time. So instead of trying to flee like the others, he stays back and is the first to call emergency services.
Fire department? Emergency. We need the fire department. All you can get here immediately. What's the problem? Oh, we got everything's on fire.
He tells them about the disaster that is about to unfold, which isn't just a simple fire. To give you more context, the fire breaks out at the Pacific Engineering and Production Company of Nevada, also known as Pepcon, which is a chemical plant that produces AP, and AP is a highly flammable oxidizer and the main ingredient in solid rocket fuel used by NASA. This facility stores 6 million pounds of rocket fuel that, if heated over 76 degrees Fahrenheit, will trigger a massive explosion and destroy everything around it. And at 11:50 a.m., the worst case scenario takes place. The fire quickly spreads out to the point that it reaches the AP present on site. And not long after, a huge explosion rips through the factory, and the engineering crew captures every single second of it. The disaster would soon be known as the largest non-military, non-nuclear explosion in US history. It's an accident that even triggers a 3.5 magnitude earthquake that can be felt from as far as 600 miles away.
It was just like a wall of water coming at you. And I remember it literally picking me up off my feet and never touching the ground. I mean, it literally picked me up and threw me at least 40 feet.
And this isn't even where it ends. The blast is so intense that even the chief of the Clark County Fire Department spots the smoke all the way from the horizon. He immediately calls all units to go to the facility to start containing the fire. But before they can even get close, another explosion shatters the windshield of his car.
They had all that fuel stored up, and then another one.
The situation just keeps growing more dangerous by the second, and even the firefighters are ordered to retreat. At this point, there's nothing they can do but just wait for the explosions to stop. At any moment, another explosion could happen because the factory holds stockpiles of that rocket fuel, and it does actually happen again. Throughout several hours, explosions keep happening. The smoke from the fire at this point vertically reaches thousands of feet in the air and is visible from hundreds of miles away. And during these explosions, 2 other facilities nearby are also obliterated.
There were 3 or 4 explosions just around lunchtime, and officials say the flames and smoke are toxic.
In total, this fire caused a series of 7 explosions. And although most of the workers were able to evacuate, 2 Pepcon employees lose their lives in this disaster. 62-year-old Roy Westerfield, who despite his limitations is the one who called the authorities, and Bruce Hawker, the plant manager who wasn't able to escape the explosion in time, while 300 other people were also injured. The disaster left a crater sizing 15 feet wide and 200 feet long. But this next disaster took an unimaginable amount of time to contain. It's February 7, 2008, Georgia. At the Imperial Sugar refinery, granulated sugar from 3 100-foot tall silos is transported into the packaging building through a system of conveyor belts. By 7 p.m., workers inside the packaging building are busy bagging that sugar for distribution. For weeks, employees had been noticing fine layers of sugar dust building up everywhere in the facility. In certain places, it's inches thick. But what most people don't realize is that when sugar dust is dry and becomes airborne, it's extremely explosive.
I never noticed the dust building up when we walked through the place. Never noticed the dust building up, and I never had an idea that sugar dust was that explosive.
It basically acts like gunpowder. Despite this, ventilation in the facility is poor and cleaning is really inconsistent. And to make matters worse, the refinery installed stainless steel panels around the conveyor belt to stop the sugar from spilling out. But the problem with that is they also trap sugar inside of it. At 7:15 p.m. that night, a clump of sugar is found blocking the movement of the conveyor belt, which tells us that more sugar is spilling out, which also means more particles break down into highly flammable fine dust. The sugar eventually comes into contact with an overheated bearing, and the heat ignites the accumulated trapped dust particles. The result is a massive explosion. The first explosion blows apart the enclosure, and it sends massive fireballs into the air. The force of the blast ignites the other layers of sugar dust. In an instant, a chain reaction of explosion goes off that quickly engulfs the entire refinery. And then, a second larger explosion hits, tearing through what's left of the building.
When you cross this bridge down the road, going into Port Wentworth, your heart dropped because you could see the flames.
The blast destroys multiple areas and traps the 112 workers inside. Some employees are thrown across rooms, while others get pinned under heavy debris. And to make matters worse, the company doesn't have any emergency evacuation plans in place.
911 emergency.
I need any unit, 5 units, sugar fighting now. It just blew up. It just blew up. I need all 5 units to the sugar refinery now. It's on fire. It blew up.
What's the address out there?
It's 2 Grange Road. Oh my God, everybody's on fire.
There's no easy escape, and so 8 workers die at the scene with dozens more injured. 6 more people later die after suffering third-degree burns, lung damage, and trauma. Emergency responders rush in from surrounding counties. One responder even calls it like walking into hell.
It was the worst scene I've been on in 48 years.
Parts of the building are so unstable that recovery teams can't even enter certain areas until days later. The fire burns for over 7 days. An investigation by the US Chemical Safety Board reveals that the refinery had ignored repeated warnings about combustible dust hazards, and most of the workers weren't even properly trained on how explosive this dust can be. This next company ignored more than 500 safety violations, and it unfortunately showed at the end.
Oh no!
On October 23, 1989, in Pasadena, Texas, the Phillips Petroleum Company's Houston Chemical Complex is carrying out routine maintenance on one of the plant's reactors. This facility produces 1.5 billion pounds or 680,000 tons of high-density polyethylene per year, which is a type of plastic used to make all kinds of everyday food containers. At 1 p.m. during the maintenance, workers disconnect air hoses that control an isolation valve. This valve is supposed to keep the flammable gas from flowing out when work is being done. But when they hook the hoses back up, they accidentally switch them. This one simple yet crucial mistake makes the valve stay open when it's supposed to be shut off. And this is what ends up leading to one of the most tragic industrial disasters in history.
Was a polyethylene reactor. That would mean that the chemicals that were released were ethylene and isobutane. Those chemicals are not toxic, but they are highly explosive.
1:05 p.m. The reactor suddenly releases 85,000 pounds of highly flammable chemicals into the air. The alarms go off as massive gas clouds suddenly fill the facility. At this point, it's already too late for the employees to escape the danger. In just under 2 minutes, the vapor finds an ignition and the facility explodes immediately. The explosion is so massive that it's like setting off 2.4 tons of TNT. A huge fire rips through the complex, and 10 minutes later, things get even worse.
Do you have friends in there?
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends in there. People I work with. No telling how many people didn't get out of there.
An isobutane tank explodes, adding to the already devastated facility. 22 employees pass away on the spot, with all of them being found within 250 feet of where the explosion happened. And just when it seems like the worst is over, less than 45 minutes later, a second reactor fails. This sparks several more explosions in the facility, with each one of them intensifying this tragedy even more.
Metal was flying in the air and it's blowing up.
Could you feel the impact?
No, it knocked me about 30 feet.
The company's emergency fire team, alongside firefighters from nearby companies and the local fire department, show up at the scene. But the fire hydrants at the HCC are sheared off by the blast, which makes the water pressure not enough to contain the fire. The team fights the fire for 10 hours until it's finally under control, but it's nearly impossible to actually save the situation.
We know these people, we worked with them, and we pray for their safety, and it's a difficult time for all of us.
The disaster injures another 340 people, and one person later dies in the hospital. The Safety and Health Administration leads the investigation in the area, and the Phillips company receives over 500 major violations and a $5.6 million fine for skipping risk checks and putting dangerous equipment too close to work areas. The company doing maintenance in the plant also faces 180 violations and a $730,000 fine. The shockwave in this next disaster hit so hard, it ended the life of the guy filming this livestream. It's August 12, 2015, Tianjin, northern China. At 10:50 p.m., residents report a fire in the Tianjin port to the authorities. A specific chemical apparently caught fire on its own because it got too hot inside a storage container. Just minutes after, firefighters locate the incident to be at the Tianjin Dongjiang port Ruhai International Logistics, which is a facility that handles hazardous chemicals, materials that are commonly used in manufacturing, mining, and other productions, which is why they're stored near major shipping routes. But what the people don't know is that these highly flammable chemicals present on site can catch fire on their own if they make contact with water, which would turn into an extreme disaster. And at 11:30 p.m., the firefighters unknowingly trigger this very event. The water in combination with the chemicals causes a massive explosion. For a moment, all we can see is a blinding light, followed shortly by fireballs shooting up into the sky. The blast registers as a 2.3 magnitude earthquake and has the same amount of power as 2.9 tons of TNT. What the people initially thought was just a normal fire quickly turned into something far more tragic. And before anybody could even react, another explosion erupts just 30 seconds later. We can see how the shockwave catches the person filming off guard and causes the camera to shake and go out of focus. This second explosion registers as a 2.9 magnitude earthquake and releases energy equal to 21.9 tons of TNT. From another angle, the shockwave hits so hard it obliterates literally everything. This footage right here came from a live stream, and you can just tell that the guy filming passed away in an instant. People living in nearby residential areas quickly run out of their homes. In an interview, a man that night says that everybody just wanted to get out of there, but they didn't know where to go. It quite literally feels like the end of the world.
It is all a blur to me now. When everyone else ran, I just followed everyone else. We ran in one direction and then back around again without thinking.
173 people lose their lives in an instant, most of them being the firefighters who thought they were just gonna put out a normal fire. And the worst thing about it, the disaster isn't over yet. The fire keeps spreading and causes 8 other smaller yet still very deadly explosions. Due to this, the massive fire continues to burn for 2 days. It becomes the deadliest incident for China's frontline responders. The building's windows have been blown out, and shattered glass and even blood is covering the streets. 3,000 people lose their homes in an instant. Even satellites can capture this event from space. And as expected, the aftermath looks like a war zone. On August 14th, 2 days after the incident, they finally managed to have it under control. But in addition to the 173 total deaths, 8 individuals are missing, and about 800 people suffer serious injuries.